everyone, welcome to Report Desk Africa on News Central Television. This is the show where we try to bring to you some of the top reports that have been making waves across the continent from Sunday up until today, Thursday, and well, actually you could say all through the week anyway. If the report is hot, if the report is trendy, if it's making waves across the continent, be sure that Report Desk Africa on News Central Television will try to bring that to you, especially if it's one of the reports that have been, looked into by some of our correspondents here at News Central. My name is Bernard Akede. It's always a pleasure to have you here with us.
And my name is Blessings Mosugu. Like I would like to say, this is a show that takes you through the present happening, the headline stories, and also comparing it to the past events and future expectations. This is Report Desk Africa. Just like Bernard said, if it's trending, if it's making headlines, then be sure that Report Desk Africa has got you covered. Thank you so much for joining us on the episode for today. And as always, we have very interesting stories to talk about. But before that, we did tell you about some things that we were expecting to happen in our forecast for last week. And we'll just take you through that very quickly. Now, we told you about the demonstrations in Ethiopia's Amhara region against the federal government's plan to integrate local defense forces into the police and the National Army.
Yes, and also we told you about that, opposition leader in Kenya, talking about Raila Odinga, made plans to engage the public directly as it, prepares to deliberate on election charges with the government. But eventually, we have an update that he rejected to have talks in the parliament, threatening to withdraw from the dialogue process. And finally, Blessings, there was still one more thing I think we talked about last week.
Of course, and we also gave the update on the International Monetary Fund's approval of $261.7 million loan for an effort to support economic recovery and reforms. Now, these are the stories that we did forecast as of last week, and we'll, of course, we'll still give you the update as it unfolds. But that being said, we're going to be focusing on today's stories, two major stories that are making the rounds on social media, on newspapers, and everywhere. And we'll start by taking you up north of the African continent, particularly in Sudan, where, as we know, the conflict has escalated, and this is a conflict that has gone on for a long time, a power play, as we would like to call it, between the military rulers and the paramilitary forces. And a lot of people do not understand why these issues are arising and how to even tackle the issue in the first place. And like they always say, if two elephants fight, the grass suffers. So the people of Sudan are really feeling the hit of this chaos. That said, we'll also go to West Africa, in Nigeria specifically, where we will tell you about the warning strike by the aviation workers in the country and how it affected thousands of people as of yesterday, I think. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back to give you more details of his stories.
Thank you for staying with us. Again, this is Report Desk Africa on News Central Television. Now, like Blessing said before the break, I beg your pardon, our first story takes us up north and on the African continent to Sudan, where the recent conflict in Sudan erupted early Saturday last week with gunfire and bombs heard near the army headquarters and presidential palace in Khartoum, the nation's capital. Now, the Rapid Support Forces RSF accused the army of attacking its forces, but the military, talking about the army, dismissed these allegations and declared the RSF a rebel group. The dispute between the two sides began when the army accused the RSF of making unauthorized moves, with their differences centering around the proposed transition to civilian rule. Now, the African Union, AU, has called for an immediate cessation of hostilities in Sudan after violent clashes broke out between the army and the Rapid Support Forces RSF. The AU Commission Chairperson Musa Faki Mahamat urged all parties involved, particularly the armed forces and the RSF, to stop the destruction, the panic, and the bloodshed, while also calling on the international community to work together to bring parties back to the negotiation table. Now, let's take a quick look at this report put together by our very own correspondent, Adeshewa Odushoga, on this, very disturbing issue that we are witnessing in Sudan.
Following mounting international calls from top world diplomats and leaders across different continents to end hostilities in Sudan that have led to the death of many, warring parties finally agreed to a ceasefire. But this was only to last for 24 hours to allow for humanitarian aid. The commander of the Rapid Support Forces, Dapo, announced the ceasefire after meeting with the U.S. Secretary of State, Anthony Blinken.
This morning, I made calls to Generals Burhan and Hamedi, urging them to agree to a 24-hour ceasefire, to allow Sudanese to safely reunite with their families, and to obtain desperately needed relief supplies. I also underscored in both calls the responsibilities that Sudanese fighting forces bear for ensuring the safety and security of U.S. and other diplomats who are resident in Sudan, as well as for UN staff and other humanitarian partners.
Following the announcement, Sudanese are seen queuing outside shops in part of Sudan's capital, Khartoum. Muslims are also seen gathering for iftar meal to break their fast at sunset in accordance with the holy month of Ramadan amidst shooting.
نخرج بإفطارنا كالعادة وكل من يصادفنا في الشارع مارا يتناول معنا الإفطار ونصر عليه إصرارا شديدا كي يفطر معنا قبل أن يصل دياره.
According to multiple witnesses, the shooting was still audible across the capital city of Khartoum at the time of the alleged ceasefire began, and it persisted into the evening. Residents are hiding out in fear as the tanks rumble through the street, buildings tremble, and smoke from fires started by the fighting lingers in the air during the holiest final days of Ramadan. Adesha Sugar reporting for News Central.
It really is a disturbing sight in Sudan, and just like Adesha reported, for the Muslims it's been even tougher because of the Ramadan period and not having enough food to eat, and not even having shelter, a secure shelter to lay their heads. But now to further discuss this, joining us now is a public affairs analyst from Sudan, Elbashir Idris. Thank you so much, Idris, for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me.
It's a pleasure. And we also have News Central's correspondent, Dapo Adegboye, who is also joining us from the studios. Thank you, Dapo.
Thank you for having me.
All right, Idris, now we see the situation in Sudan. I mean, this is a power play, obviously, and then the people of Sudan are suffering it. They're feeling the heat very severely. Now, we also hear that now the Sudanese people are suffering weather conditions, in addition to the food shortages, is as bad as they can't even open their windows for air because they're scared of catching a stray bullet. Can you just provide an update on the current situation in the country right now with regards to the ongoing clashes between the army and the RSF, the Rapid Support Forces?
Sure thing. So the current situation in Sudan, we're now in day 6 of fighting between the RSF and the SAF within Khartoum, Al-Obeid and Darfur. However, as of today here in Khartoum, we've seen much less activity in terms of warfare happening. However, that does not remain the same in places like Al-Obeid and Darfur, where we still see adversity reaching boiling points. Now, as regarding to the humanitarian aid and assistance, since the electrical grids have become down and mass migration has occurred with people leaving Khartoum and reaching into the more periphery states of Sudan, there is a question of A, logistics, B, can these other states be able to handle the mass influx and exodus of these IDPs from Khartoum, and whether or not they'll be able to get that humanitarian and safe passage for them to receive food, aid, and medicine. Furthermore, with electricity cuts, that means a lot of backup medicine that usually needs cold storage is now essentially in the hot, just as the people are, as they need to open the windows. The same goes for medicine and food. They become spoiled and medicines suddenly expire due to the conditions they are in. Now, the conflict in itself, it's a very rapid, or rather well-escalating situation, as now it's starting to become a bit more regional within the area and international as well, as you've said. So we have many different factors and rivals who are playing almost a proxy war within Khartoum. As such, a lot of the damages that we see and the lack of communication due to the electricity shortages, it's really making it difficult to get a clearer picture. However, what I have heard and been verified is Khartoum has essentially become a ghost town due to everybody leaving and going to much more safer areas. However, whether that passage, they take it at their own risk, and there has been reports of people being captured or worse, killed by armed forces within the main road. So it's a very precarious situation that many people do want to leave the conflict area. However, they have to do so at their own risk, as there is no official safe passage. So this is a very precarious situation. It's very volatile. And as it's Eid tomorrow for the Muslims, people are hoping that this will come and simmer down in time for the Islamic celebrations. Now, whether that happens or not, fortunately, history has taught us that within the RSF and the SAF, they have committed atrocities a day before Eid. We need to look at the 2019 3rd June massacre that happened in Khartoum, which was on the eve of Eid Day. 4 years later, here we are on the 20th of April, the day before Eid. Activity has been a bit sizzling, to say the least, but people are still on the fence over what could happen. But prayers stay strong, and as such, so should the message that a humanitarian corridor needs to be open for these people.
Elbashir, there's so many questions I would like to throw at you, but I'll come back to you very soon. Talking about atrocities that have been it's even difficult to say this now. Talking about RSF and the military committing certain atrocities in the past, and people having fears that these atrocities will be committed once again. And again, there always is the window for other groups to come in and also wreak havoc on the city and on the people and take advantage of issues like this when two major groups are fighting. We've seen cases like this up north in Libya and in other parts of the world and of the continent. But we'll come back to you, Elbashir. Dapo, like Elbashir said, very precarious situation indeed. We're seeing people fleeing the capital, Khartoum, not just Sudanese fleeing the capital. We're also seeing people from other nationals. We heard, first of all, that the Kenyan president tried to make way for at least 3,000 Kenyan citizens and nationals to leave the country. Other country presidents are doing the same. This clearly shows that the situation has indeed escalated and it's looking really bad, don't you think?
I mean, it's really, really sad what we are beginning to see right now in Sudan. Really sad, pretty much disheartening. I mean, just to give a bit of light to it, two generals who were pretty much instrumental in taking out the former, well, I call it dictator right now. It's been the ruler of Sudan for 30 years, talking about Omar, and then eventually these two generals, we have Al-Burhan and the Gallo, is more or less a tussle of power. And that tells you, or it says so much about the African continent and the sit-tight power, will I call it power crazy mentality, so to speak. And it's really tight. And the sad part is that at the end of the day, the people that are suffering are just the regular people who go about their daily lives, right? And that's a reflection of what we're seeing in Khartoum. Really, really, really disheartening. I just got a report today that quite a number of Nigerians are also there. Yes. Apart from Chinese, we have Tanzanians there, and let's also not forget the economic situation, in Sudan, prior to all of this conflict, right? We know of the COVID-19 pandemic. The country is still trying to come out of it. The economic ratings pretty much low. And right now, because of the, let's say, selfish interest of two generals, an entire country is put on hold. It's just disheartening. And it's really, really sad. Yes, we know that at some point the people wanted a change of power. Yes, someone was in power for 30 years. They wanted a spin, a change. These two generals came together. They made that happen about 4 years ago. Right now, the people are saying, you know what, let's have a true democracy, right? Let's have that transition. And the question right now between the generals, okay, so who eventually controls the army? Who eventually, calls the shots? And I think in the interest of the country, in the interest of humanity, it's just human nature, right? You could as well say, you know what, in the interest of the country, let's find a peaceful approach to this. I think one of the crux, apart from the economic, interest of the parties involved and the power interest also, there's also the aspect of selfishness, just pure greed. So I just feel that all of this crisis is not necessary and of course not timely at this point, particularly for a country that is struggling, on many fronts, right? The world right now is talking about measures on how to come out of the COVID-19. And right now, African countries particularly are looking for avenues, to bounce back economically and improve the livelihoods of the people. So I think this particular, the fear right now is that all of this does not escalate into a full-blown civil war. We don't pray for that.
Certainly,
right?
No African country is praying for another civil war.
Exactly. So for me, even though, yes, the talks of ceasefire, has been, has come up, and there has been some sort of agreement, but we are still hearing, reports of ongoing fightings in spite of the ceasefire. I just hope and pray that eventually both leaders, come to the round table to talk and not just, continue to throw bombs and shoot rounds of ammunition, and distorting the life of just the regular Sudanese going about their business.
Definitely. It's almost as if it's a chance for them to test the weapons that have been laying dormant for a while. The clips and images we've been seeing coming out of Sudan have been very, very disturbing. But Elbashir, just before Blessings asks you her next question, I quickly want to bring back what I was saying before Dapo spoke. It's the cliche saying that it couldn't get any worse than this now, could it? Or could it? I'm asking this because we're seeing two top one military, one paramilitary general fighting for power in this country. Could there be a chance, and I'm not asking you to be the prophet of doom, but could there be a chance that another force or another body or another power or another stronghold could just sneak into this and use the opportunity to also wreak havoc and to take advantage of the people who already are troubled?
Yes, definitely. So I'm not sure who's been reporting on this. However, over 12 hours ago, or more than 12 hours ago at 1 a.m., a US satellite had crashed, or rather had fell between on the border of Sudan with Libya, Egypt, and Chad, which is a very volatile region within those borders because we have Haftar's troops in Libya, we got Sisi in Egypt, we have Chad, and we have the RSF stronghold within that border. And that small place where now a satellite has been crashed, as reported by the Astronomy Center, it could present a new sort of kind of issue of what's going to happen in the future. And it's one of those things where we already have the Islamists, the previous 30-year regime that were in charge, and they're still around, and it's very easy for people to wear different uniforms and commit atrocities in the name of that organization and group. So in terms of verification of who's actually doing what and who's part of who, it's difficult, I will admit. However, we are still observing the situation because at any point in any time, things could just rapidly explode even much more worse than before. The two generals, they thought they could get away with this. It seems that with their actions, they bit off more than they can chew. And now they have attracted the attention of regional players and international players who have bigger eyes and appetites than them. And now it seems that the Sudanese people, or rather the generals, are being brought into something else that it's way above their heads now. So what started off as a very foolish, unnecessary endeavor by both sides has now spilt into a situation that needs to be contaminated immediately. Why? Because as you just said, we have East Africans and West Africans and Central Africans and the whole continent and members of it within Khartoum who still need to get out. And there is no way that we wish to see any sort of escalation of conflict that would hurt the Sudanese people and internationals within Sudan. It's just completely not fair. So if anything, before it can get worse, it really can get worse. So to kind of expect the generals to calm down, simmer down, understand the situation, and not to be taking some sort of proxies from others, yes. But I agree also that we should not completely wash this as some sort of international thing only. This started because two men or a few men thought that they could play games and with the cost of people's lives, and now it's spilt over too much, and essentially it's hurting everyone. May it be Sudanese, may it be internationals, expats, may it be neighboring countries, and may it be all those who have some sort of stake in Sudan. There is now a need that things need to simmer down. A ceasefire does need to happen, and an investigation really into how this occurred, especially as you say, post-COVID now, a lot of African countries are trying to bounce back up. If we see this happening here in Sudan, what's the next question? Can we see this happening elsewhere? Are there similar conditions in Sudan, in other countries? And could that happen as well? So there's a few questions we need to analyze. However, I'm sure we will get to the bottom of it as time comes.
You know, gentlemen, it's quite ironic and also very sad that what we can call an attempt at a ceasefire has degenerated into more casualties and more lives lost. And hopefully there is an end to it. But, I mean, Idris, you are in a better position to answer this question. So I'll just like to direct it at you. What would you say the international bodies can do? What role do you think they can play in trying to curb this situation? What help can they render to Sudanese people right now?
Well, the help in this sense is sorting out some sort of boundaries between the different forces where they are not allowed to cross each other. This way it keeps the RSF on one side, SAF on another side, and then it will be able to hopefully create a passageway. Now, in terms of ports of access into that, we are looking into, we have to understand it can be the airports, it can be Port Sudan by the Red Sea, it can be from Egypt, it can be from Ethiopia, South Sudan, Chad, etc. So, if anything, the international organizations, I'm sure they're looking at different ports of access to into Sudan and the most safest ones. However, there must be strong condemnation, not just condemnation, but however action by the international community to put pressure and punitive measures onto those who have started this, and a full investigation needs to be done on that. Regarding the people themselves, we've been seeing amazing work with the Sudanese people and how they've organized using the systems of a decentralized network, rather the resistance committees, the different trade unions, doctors' unions, and syndicates of professions, you name it. They've all come together in a way of civil society to aid one another. Now, if international organizations were serious, they should reach out to these organizations and to these representatives of civilians who carry legitimacy because of their numbers in their unions, and seek to collaborate with one another to see what medicines are needed, what food is needed, what's the best way to get them into the country, and the best distribution of it. So in terms of international organizations, they really need to be talking to the civilians. The military, the ceasefire, yes, okay. That means stop war, stop the fighting, cool. But then on this side, it's how do you talk between the civilians and those on outside. And the communication between that is happening, it is going. So it's just a matter of time. Though at the end of the day, no real action can happen unless there's a silence of guns. And considering the behavior that we've seen of armed forces on both sides, it seems that this behavior is very erratic, and it's completely broken the trust between the Sudanese people and the Sudanese armed forces and RSF, the Rapid Support Forces.
Okay, but I'm sorry, I may have to cut you short. We're gradually running out of time. I want to quickly throw this to Dapo, just in 1 minute, Dapo. How do you think that this, how do you anticipate that this, what do you anticipate that this violence, what kind of impact do you think it will have on the already fragile economy of Sudan, one, and then the transition to democracy, which the whole world has and the Sudanese people have been anticipating? Should we still be expecting this anytime soon? Do you think that these two, warring factions will eventually sheath their swords, proverbially, as we say, and decide to channel their cause towards a sustainable democracy, or are we going to see a collapse of this whole, of the both forces, and then restart the process all over again?
All right, now, in all of this, I'll just say time is of essence. The fight or the crisis is almost a week now, and it's been reported that over 200 people have been killed already, and over 1,000, almost 2,000 people injured. Now, hospitals, schools, business areas, particularly in the capital, Khartoum, are on shutdown right now. They're on lockdown. So that simply tells you that if nothing is done as soon as possible, by the international community, by the local community there, people of influence who can actually talk to these generals to tell their men to stand down, then God forbid, we might just be looking at another civil war. And we know the implication of crisis. We know the implication of chaos. It simply means you are taking the country back let me not use millions of years, but you are really taking the country back, right? If you look at the amount of damage already done, particularly on infrastructure, right now, power cut, is a major issue right now in Khartoum because the grid has been hit by some of the rockets and all of that. So we are looking at severe, consequences on the economy, negative severe consequences on the economy, negative severe consequences on the political process. The democratic transition, we might not see that happening anytime soon. So I think right now, time is everything. And we know that right now the international community is also really bogged up with the war between Russia and Ukraine. That's, a major issue right now, top burner. And we also know that there are other crises that the world is trying to grapple with, adding that of Sudan to it. So I just feel that if nothing is done as soon as possible, we might just be seeing Sudan go back, many years.
All
right, thank you so much for that. Public affairs analyst Elbashir Idris, thank you so much for giving us an update on the situation in Sudan. And also thank you to Dapo, Adegboye, our correspondent in the studio, for also joining us to discuss this. Really appreciate you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
You're still watching Report Desk Africa. We're going to a short break, and when we come back, another story from a different angle. Do stay with us.